production, just with white chiffon and white light and white candles. This is just one of the poems. Soul Desire. Under the soft, translucent linen, the ridges around your nipples harden at the port of my tongue. You, lying inverted like the letter C, arch yourself deliberately, wanting the warm press of my lips. It's wet to coat the skin that is bristling, burning, breaking into sweats of desire, sweet juices of imagination. But in fact, I haven't even touched you. At least, not yet. So I'll move to the second section, which is sort of a segue into a chat with Shashi. So I'll come down and sit there and take on.
Do we have handheld mics or something?
Yeah, there's a
handheld. Won't be able to
handheld
hear us. But that's a News 24 mic.
Yeah. Excuse me. What about the sound thing? Hello?
Not listening to me?
Yeah, now it's fine. There's an echo problem in the audio. Yeah, just check it out.
Yeah, I'd love to. So these cameras are restricting literature. Hello.
Mind the working. Hello. No. Just switch on the fader, please. Hello. No, it's not working.
And nor is this, this mic is not
working now.
This one is not
There's
working.
a problem with the.
All right, so I actually have a mic. It's Sudeep who needs one. Try that and see if that works.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah. There's an echo problem in the audio.
So I'll partly sort of read.
Please announce to everybody to please turn their phone.
Yes, we love the ringtones, but not now. So either hear it in quiet or you know what to do.
Also interferes with the mics, I think.
Yeah, there's a static.
I turned mine off, but I'll...
So my arc with Shashi Tharoor goes back when he was a young boy and I was even younger. That's pretty scary. This is way back in New York. He was newly ensconced in his UN tall high-rise next to the river. I was diligently studying at Columbia University, studying documentary film and photography. But what he was doing was writing novels and I was writing poetry. So I'll just give you a quick background and then we'll have a chat. The India Shastra is essentially a compilation of Shashi Tharoor's 100 essays, speeches, papers, some of which have been modified and extended for this book. The bulk of the pieces, unsurprisingly, have to do with the government, Modi policies, politics, things we know, read, and have an opinion about on a daily basis. But I was more attracted to what I was more attracted to are sections that dealt with the larger issues, ideas, legacies of people like war heroes, Gandhi, Patel, Vivekanand, Tagore, and so on. So before I formally begin, I must say that I'd like to explore more the interior aspects, spaces of Shashi's creative life, rather than the more obvious exterior political plane he's known for. Almost 2 decades back, I had a long conversation with him that resulted in a 10, 12-page interview spread in the Sunday Mail, where I worked then. He was 2 books old, The Great Indian Novel, which came out in 1989, and at the same time, his oldest stories were put together, The $5 Smile and Other Stories, one of which was published when he was only 10 years old. Even earlier, in the late 1980s, which you referred to earlier on in New York City when I was a student, I saw him at my Greenwich Village flat on Charles Street that I shared with a fellow writer whom he had come to meet. I was also on my UN beat assignment when I went to his office and talked about, interviewed him and so on for my assignment. He read at the Poets and Writers Studio International, which was a reading series I co-curated. Then years later, I was commissioned to review for his the novel Show Business, which came out in the TLS Times Literary Supplement and so on. So our quiet comradeship goes back almost 3 decades. So your initial thoughts on your career arc and on the India Shastra in particular.
Well, India Shastra, as you said, is really just a collection of essays, and in some ways it's a collection of essays that actually try and, in a sense, complete a de facto trilogy. It wasn't started as one, but it's become one. That began with India from midnight to the millennium at the 50th anniversary of India's independence. Because on that occasion, frankly, I tried to do a broad sweep of the entire history, politics, society, economics, culture of the first 50 years of India's independence. And then what happened was that 10 years later, my publishers wanted me to sort of bring the story up to date for the 60th anniversary. And I came up with The Elephant, the Tiger, and the Cell Phone, which used a lot of my writings after India from Midnight to the Millennium was published. Normally that meant I should have waited for the 70th or the 75th or something for the next book. But I think we all agreed that the election results of last year were sufficiently momentous that it was time for a certain stock taking of where we were. And so this is a kind of peculiar anniversary in a sense, because even if you count the number of Republic Days, we are at 65, which is not particularly a special number. Independence Days will be at 68 coming up in August. So there's no particular anniversary like 50 or 60, but rather an opportunity to look at where the country is at this watershed moment after Mr. Modi's election. The first couple of sections of the book actually cover, probably for the first time in hardback, analysis and critiques of the new government, or no longer so new now, but then the new government's first 6 months in office. And then the remaining essays are all sorts of things. There's essays on the legacy, the historical recent history that the government has inherited, on policies ranging from education to some of the new foreign policy initiatives of Mr. Modi. There are some non-political essays on various aspects of our society, whether we should permit clubs to ban people from wearing dhotis, which is a controversy that came up not long ago in Chennai, whether we should look at some of the other aspects of our society in a fresh light. And I end with a couple of fairly personal reflections on my birthday, on the joys of airport security when you have the kind of color that most of us in this room have. That creates certain special challenges in these days of worries about terrorism, and so on and so forth. So you've got a range of issues covered. None of the essays is particularly long. There are some which began life in my head as sort of policy speeches as a minister, and therefore those have become a little more substantive, the ones on education, for example. There are some which involve longer reflections than the normal sort of op-ed length would permit. I have a piece on our free and irresponsible media. I have essays on social media, freedom of expression, and so on. And I have a large number of very short essays, between 1,000 and 1,300 words, which had begun life as op-ed pieces or columns or blogs on my NDTV site. So I've got a range of things which, very frankly, I hope will turn out to be of interest to all of you. You don't have to read the book cover to cover. You can dip into it and read a theme or a story that interests you, and I hope return to the book later.
You know, 2 days back, the Walcotts, Derek Walcott, the Nobel laureate, and Sigrid in particular, wrote this email, so I'm going to read it out. Wish we could have been there for today's event. We've met Shashi Tharoor at a party in New York at Glenn Horowitz's apartment. I sat in between him and Carl Bernstein, the language poet, I guess circa 2005. And we discussed the inundation of emails one gets every day and what a plague it was to have to answer all of them. Give my regards from us. Now, I'm reading this because there's a wonderful, wonderful piece called Pandora's Inbox in this book, of course very cleverly titled, where I'll quote, he writes very enthusiastically, ... I became an avid and diligent emailer, and how I regret it. So you're very active on social media and Twitter and so on. How does it affect one's public and private life, and more importantly, work, and very, very importantly, creativity?
I think actually they all affect all of them. But starting off with email, yeah, I'm just drowning, and I find that most nights I'm up till 2:30 just trying to keep up with the inbox of the day, because if I don't, the next day I'd be drowned even more in new messages, and I don't know what to do with it. At one point, when I became minister, I found myself the object of assorted, and God knows how people got hold of my personal email, but they were zapping me with. I remember one point something like 400 emails, identical ones, as part of a campaign by Muslim students who didn't want to take exams on Fridays. And it was, how do you reply to these 400 individual messages? Yes, you can type a reply, cut and paste, and issue it each time, but then in the meantime, you've written some other message or cut and pasted something else, and again, you've got to go back, find your reply, copy it. It became very tiresome. And I actually briefly decommissioned my account. At least I told the world that I had decommissioned it by having an auto reply. So when people wrote to my account, they got a reply saying, so this account is decommissioned. If you want to write on this subject, you write to so and so, on that subject, you write to so and so, etc. I sent that out. Even that failed to work. And in the end, in any case, because so many personal friends have my personal email, I had to check my email anyway so I didn't miss communication from people who really did matter to me. So that was failure number one. Failure number two on email is these days, because what's happening is that once again, somehow my personal email seems to become currency. Currently, I have actually done this cutting and pasting of replies to 575 people who've written to me on net neutrality. And I get, 50 or 60 a day. There seem to be basically 2 or 3 variants of texts, all issued by some avid campaigners for this cause. The cause is good. I actually support net neutrality. But my gosh, how many times can you read the same message over and over again? Your eyes start glazing over, so you just start sending back this automatic reply. Yeah, I support it, now leave me alone, kind of thing. But it takes time. And one of the frustrations of communication is that most forms of communication add on to other forms of communication without ending the other. So when letter writing was invented, it continued. Then the phone call was invented, but letters still got written and phone calls still got made. Then the telegram was invented, but letter writing, phone calls, telegrams all came about. Then you had faxes. Now faxes, of course, and telegrams have more or less begun to die a natural death because email came along. But you still have the other means of communication going as well. And now, as you said in your question, we have social media. So that's multiple new forms of communication. There's Twitter and Facebook that most people are on. Facebook is what I think is the most popular in India. If I'm not mistaken, we are the second largest Facebook population in the world already. And in Twitter, we're also heading to that rank, though at lower numbers. I use them as social media, that is, as a means of mass communication, putting out my message, activities, opinions, and so on, and reacting at random when I have time to see an incoming message. Unlike email, I don't feel obliged to reply to everyone, even though they are writing personally to me, because I think social media is not meant to be sort of for one-on-one communication. But that makes a lot of people upset, because I keep getting complaints from people that they tweeted me something and I never replied. But the problem is, I get something like 400 to 500 tweets addressed to me every day. And on the average day, I'll be lucky to see 5 or 10 of them. Because there just isn't time to do all of this, to do your work, your meetings, your phone calls, your letters, and your emails. And then top of that, also reply to individual communication. You'll do nothing else but handling correspondence. So this is the big challenge. And when I say I regret it, there are moments when I dearly wish that there was some temporary complete breakdown in every form of communication, so you could actually just sit down and read or think or whatever, because modern life doesn't allow you to. And in public life, you can't just switch off everything and ignore it, because, and I know some writers do, when you're working on a book, or I'm sure in your case you're working on a poem, you just don't look at your emails. But for somebody in politics or public life, anything that your constituents and voters use to reach you, you can't avoid.
Well, Dr. Tharoor, sorry Sudeep for butting in. In public life, you can switch off for 56 days.
There's a good journalist at work. But you remember how much comment there has been about that. So I'm sure that it'll be more difficult for anyone to switch off for that many days after this experience.
Carry on, Sudeep.
So I'll continue on the track of Sashi's other side, because on television, he's talked enough about politics and governance and so on. And tracking his life, I realized that family and friendships are terribly, terribly important. They appear as interesting ghostly characters in the various books you've written, actually. Sometimes in disguise, sometimes as obvious people if you happen to know them. As our country now turns 65, your grandmother is going to be 98 and his mother is going to be 78. And collaborations, friendships, death are integral part of one's growth, hurts and happinesses. Talk about some of these. Your son is now a writer.
I have twin sons and they both write.
And his new book is going to be coming out.
Yes,
but
that's
tell me about the key figures who have had a sort of osmotic effect when it came to your literary writing.
Well, on the literary front, I would just say that my biggest advantage was that I read widely and indiscriminately, and anyone in this audience who's aspiring to be a writer, that's my recommendation. Read widely, read indiscriminately. Don't worry about what people tell you should read. Read what gives you pleasure. Read what, through the reading, you find you are benefiting from, consciously or unconsciously, as you said, osmotically. You will end up with a sense of how you yourself want to write, if you are that way inclined. And certainly for me, there is no better training for writing than reading, because seeing how other people have done it, whether you can do it or even whether you want to do it the same way is a different matter. No two writers are exactly alike. It's like two signatures are not alike. Everyone writes in their own distinctive way. It's as distinctive as the way you speak or the way you breathe, I think. And so I don't really think that writing can be taught in that sense. But you can learn from other people's use of technique. You can discover how much is possible by the efforts of other writers to expand the realm of the possible. And therefore, reading is in many ways the best teacher. And I read a lot, and I suppose to that degree I was lucky that I grew up reading when there was no email and no TV and no computers and no Nintendo and none of the other distractions that prevent us from being able to sit down with a book today. I read much less today when all of these other distractions are there than when I was growing up. So having said that, influences from family and influences on family. Influences from family, I think my first and biggest tribute is to my late father, because I was an asthmatic child and I was basically unable to sleep much of the time because I was finding it difficult to breathe. I had to sit up in bed just sort of struggling for breath. As I said, there were no computers or other distractions. There was only books, but I was the eldest child in the family and I rapidly exhausted the books available to me. So I had only two choices, book cricket and reading. I beg your pardon, and writing. Reading, once that was exhausted. And so I played a bit of book cricket, quite a bit, making imaginary teams and opening pages at random to work out the score. No one does that anymore because you're far more sophisticated ways of whiling away your time, but in those days,